My name is Eddie C, and welcome to my positive podcast. I'll bring you positive stories of people from all walks of life, because everyone has a story to tell. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to MPP, my positive podcast, and I'm your host, Eddie C. This is episode number 30. Well, I hope that you all have been doing well and adjusting to the new year with a lot of positive vibes and, let's say, good ideas that you want to take care of in this coming year. I'm starting with mine as well. There's going to be, of course, the new Patreon thing that we started, and this way you can help support my show by becoming a positivist. I'll bring you in contact with other positivists and with a subscription for only €5 a month. That's going to include extra content. It's going to give you also like 30% off on the webpage for buying our scarves and t-shirts and caps and any other merchandising that we do in the future. So stay tuned for that. Look on my website, mypositivepodcast.com, and you can also check on my Facebook page, and I'll be posting little films and information about that periodically there as well. Well, our show today is going to be about diversity, and I have a very special guest who's sort of like a family member to me, and she's been on the show before. So before we get into her whole story, I want you to sit back, tune in, and stay positive. My name is Eddie C, and you're listening to My Positive Podcast. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my next guest has been on the show earlier. She's working for a biotech company and world traveler, and happens to be very close family to me since a few years. Please welcome Miss Anke Sunaert. How you doing?
Hi, Eddie. Doing very well, thanks. How about you?
I'm doing fine. Good to see you again. We saw each other recently, just a few days ago, and last week with Christmas.
Yeah, lots of partying.
Yeah. You know, the last time you were on the show, we spoke a lot about your vacationing, and you spoke a bit about your work. But maybe it might be nice for listeners that are hearing you for the first time to tell a little bit more about that.
Sure. About my job?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, indeed, I work in biotech for a company called Kite Pharma, and we do immunocell therapy to fight certain types of cancer indication of blood cancers. I'm not the technical or scientific profile, though. I'm in a support function of human resources and support the learning and development, and especially leadership development of our people leaders in the organization globally.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that brings the audience back up to date for those who didn't know that. And of course, you like to travel. So you want to tell them a little bit about your traveling experiences. I mean, you've been all over.
I've been all over. There's still 2 continents to cover. I haven't been to Australia or New Zealand or Oceania. And I haven't been to Antarctica. Though I was very close when I was in Ushuaia in Argentina. But other than that, I've done and seen a lot in Asia, South America, North America, and Europe.
World traveler, as we say.
And Africa, only
Okay. Well, we were talking the other day at your brother's house, bringing you back on the show, and there were a couple of subjects we were toiling with, and I know one was diversity and inclusion. What is your vision about diversity?
Well, for me, diversity is a fact of today's world. I would say with globalization, diversity has also globalized and spread across the world. It always has, but it's much strongly represented in communities this day. So that makes it even more important every day to recognize everyone's uniqueness and accept them for who they are, and regardless of where they come from, what their cultural or religious background is, what the color of their skin is, what their sexual orientation is, what their gender identity is. We're all human beings with a lot of common universal needs. Diversity is a representation of the world, I would say. I think the beauty of it is in inclusion, when you really value people for who they are and make them feel accepted for who they are as a human being, because that also means that they can feel like they can really be their authentic self, and that also means that they will show up to the best of their ability and show the best version of themselves when they feel accepted and appreciated.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. That's very important. I see, even though we have let's say, basically pretty diverse society as individuals, there's a lack, I think, of communication and understanding and empathy and within a lot of people, because we've kind of created this individualistic world. With the modern technology, it's been a good thing and it's been also a bad thing. I think it's been a good thing as far as being able to bring people together, like we're having our conversation now and all. But on the other hand, I see a lot of youth, and they're sitting together in a room and they're texting to each other in the same room, which is madness, if you ask me. So there's no real personal communication between people. And how do you view that yourself?
Well, Eddie, from a diversity perspective, I would invite you to also look at that from the viewpoint of curiosity, because diversity is also differences in generations and how different generations have different motivations and drivers and ways of communicating. And indeed, what we observe is that Gen Z, and even more so the digital natives, so the generation Alpha that comes after Gen Z, is very much attached to online communications and connections. So I want to steer away from judgment, because it's indeed different from the way that I prefer to build genuine and close connection. But every generation has different ways. So I would approach it from a perspective of curiosity and seeing how it fulfills their needs, rather than viewing it from my point as an elder millennial in how it wouldn't, and you as a baby boomer, how it wouldn't fulfill our needs. But that's also how cultures evolve, and there's always good and bad things about it, and usually it sort of balances it out. When there's something new, we tend to go a little overboard with it, to then come back to the middle. And a bit more grounded, and I think that's what we're also currently seeing in the current world.
Okay, you say you see that coming back to a sort of a middle point. You want to go a little bit further with that and explain that a little bit more to me, coming from an older generation.
I think as a culture, as a humanity, we're currently in our adolescence, which also shows in the way that that things are very turbulent. So that we are overreacting sometimes. And my view, but also my hope, maybe I'm too optimistic, is that that will find its way. I think you're already seeing that in certain movements, that people are seeking for much more genuine and authentic connection, going back to the basics, back to nature, seeking a much better work-life balance, putting much more emphasis on community, on family, compared to the previous generations. So I see a lot of things moving in a positive direction.
Oh, I see things moving also in a very positive direction with a lot of things. I'm looking, for example, like politics. Just to brush up on it a little bit, if you look at the way some of the countries are going politically at the moment, there's a lot of unrest in the world around that. And because of that, our economic situation has also been changing a lot. And so I think personally, that's my personal view, is that we need to maybe become a little bit more aware of what's really going on in our direct surroundings. Sometimes I kind of miss that.
Yeah. I'm no expert in politics nor economics, so I want to refrain from making statements in that regards. But I do think I find it personally very important to be aware of what is happening around me and how our world is evolving, and to educate myself. And some people are more inclined to do so, and some others are not, and might enjoy the bliss of ignorance. But then that also means for me that if they choose to do so, to not be involved in politics, then, well, in a democracy, if you don't want to be involved and don't want to vote and contribute, well, then in my point of view, you don't have a right to complain either. So either you take action and participate, or you shut your mouth.
Okay. Let me ask you another question about your traveling. You know, like you said, you've traveled 5 of the 7 continents. And how do you view the world from your traveling? I know you spent some time recently in the States on the West Coast, I think, for a while, and for your work. Came back, but before you were saying you've been to Asia, the other countries. How do you see that as a world traveler? Your experiences about, let's say, the diversity between cultures and bringing it all together, you know?
Mm-hmm. I personally find it very interesting to observe cultural differences, or how we fulfill our needs as human beings. We all have the same needs, but we fulfill them in different ways. We have a lot of values in common across cultures, but they manifest in different ways. Like, for example, respect is a basic value that is very important in lots of cultures. However, the way that it's expressed can be very different. Like, for example, in Belgium and the Netherlands, the cultures that I'm most familiar with, when you go to a restaurant, it's a sign of respect when a waiter clears your table when you're finished, when everyone seated at the table has finished their meal. However, in Italy, for example, and some other cultures, it's respectful to take away your plate as soon as you've finished, as one person has finished. So it's the same core value, but expressed in different behaviors, although they originate from the same thing. So I think digging a little deeper as to understand why certain behaviors are being demonstrated and what value they represent is very interesting, more than making a judgment on it. And it's perfectly human and natural to make judgments. It's mental shortcuts that our brain makes. Our brain is wired to ensure our survival. So anything that is unfamiliar is deemed unsafe, and therefore we'll judge it. And that is perfectly normal. We all do that. People that say that they don't judge, they're talking bullshit. The only thing that you can do is be aware of the judgments that you have and the biases that you have. But we all have them.
I wholeheartedly agree with you on that as well. We were talking about cultural intelligence. You want to go into that a little deeper?
Well, I think it's not my opinion. It's been researched. But one of the signature traits of inclusive leadership is cultural intelligence and cognizance. There's 6 signature traits. Deloitte has done a lot of research on this. But cognizance is indeed being aware of your biases. Your biases are unconscious. But when you investigate yourself, or ask deeper questions to yourself, or take tests like the open source implicit association test from Harvard University, you can learn what biases you have. And knowing that, raising your awareness of that also means that you can build in a pause between something that triggers you and how you react. Because then you can approach yourself with curiosity and say, oh, why do I have this judgment? How come? And ask yourself why, and then also what does it really mean, or what does it say about me more than about the other person? So that's one way. to not go on autopilot, but to question yourself and the biases that you have coming from certain privileges that we have. I'm white. I grew up in Western Europe in a middle class family. I'm straight. So all of these things come with certain privileges that I'm very much aware of. So that's cognizance, and then cultural intelligence is indeed mitigating your unconscious bias by making them conscious, and questioning them, and also showing curiosity towards another culture instead of making judgments, asking open questions to people from the intention to learn rather than to judge, and then just observe neutrally. Oh, that's different from the way that we do it.
Quite interesting. It's nice to hear your approach in this way because we know each other personally outside of the program. And speaking with you in this way is a whole different thing than when we're talking over a glass of wine with the family. It's really nice. I want to ask you another question with your job that you're doing now. Are there any new developments that you all are busy with?
Yeah, so our organization is, our purpose is we're focused on the cure. So what we want to do is change the way that cancer is being treated. And we're now developing therapies for 2 cancer indications, but of course we hope to expand our portfolio with adjacent therapies. But ultimately what we want to do is serve patients so that we create a happier, healthier, and therefore happier life for a lot of people, because it's not only about the patients, but also their families, circle of friends. I think everyone, it would be very rare if you haven't been exposed to someone in your close circle that has suffered from cancer. Cancer, it's really an awful, cruel disease. So our mission is to do something about that, to hopefully one day find a cure in a non-invasive way. Like everyone knows, when people have cancer at a certain point, they get chemotherapy, which is really devastating for the whole body. So immunocell therapy is much more targeted, hasn't that much side effects, and has potential to cure.
Right.
So that's our purpose, but it's definitely it's very new. There's a lot of potential, but a lot of more research and clinical trials need to be done before we're there.
Mm-hmm. All right. That's quite coincidental because my last guest is a terminal cancer patient, and she was told that if she did chemotherapy, that it was only going to speed the cancer up at a certain point. Very interesting that you all are taking a different approach, and actually, I will bring you all in contact with each other. It can be a very interesting meeting between you.
I feel very inspired and reminded of our purpose when I talk to patients. But that being said, I'm also not in the scientific side of things. But happy to hear a story, because that reminds me a lot of why we do what we do, why I wake up in the morning and make a contribution, even if it's very indirect. I'm not close at all to our patients.
That's a wonderful thing, you know. Are there any things that you would like to say, pass on to people from your viewpoint, how to, let's say, see the world as a better place than, say, the next 5 or 6 years?
Well, I would like to refer to Elizabeth Gilbert. She's a writer of Eat, Pray, Love. Mm-hmm. And she's really an amazing, inspiring, thought-provoking author and speaker. And the way that she approaches things before she judges is when she notices something, you say, "Oh, interesting." So instead of, "Oh, that's different," or "That's weird," or "That's not what I'm used to." So that's to approach things with curiosity, and maybe sometimes delaying your judgment. But oftentimes when you learn more, you don't judge anymore, because you see that there's more commonality and similarities than differences between people and culture. So, interesting.
Okay, that's good. That's good. That'll be the new word we'll use. Interesting.
But I'm also curious, Eddie, about your experience being a Black man from the US, transported to Western Europe, the Netherlands, Belgium, and how you experienced.
Well, that's a whole series of podcasts. If I may be honest about it, no, but basically, when I came over to Europe in 1975, the world was a completely different place. There were no smartphones. The computers were in let's say the baby shoes at the time, and only used with the NASA sending a rocket up to the moon or something like that. And so the first years were for me, let's say, adjust to a Dutch culture at the time, because of course I lived in Holland for like 38 years. Once I started to learn a little bit more about the language, it made it a little easier for me to understand the Dutch culture. I was always the guy on the outside looking in, but it gave me a lot of strength and interesting values towards living among the Dutch culture. I actually went through the same thing when I moved to Belgium, some almost 15 years ago, because that was completely different again than a Dutch culture. At a certain point, I've noticed over the years that for me, the Netherlands has become sort of like almost a 51st state, very similar to the United States, and a lot of things that they're doing. And for me, my experiences here in Belgium is that it's still basically the same as it was when I knew it before. There's some changes being made. Of course, the media industry has become very commercialized and manipulating a lot of our society that believe everything that they see on television, because it's not what it seems. And I've been on both sides of the screen, so I can vouch for that for 100%. I do think, though, that I always see myself first as a man, and I see myself second as a Black man. And so for me, it's I can talk with anyone, and I'm not going to look at their color, their background, their ethnicity. I'm going to talk to them just as person to person. And I find that a very important thing as far as communicating with people, because when you break down barriers, then you can have a real interesting talk with each other. That's basically how I see it. How did you experience being white when you went to the States? I don't know if you went to any Black neighborhoods and when you were in the States to kind of like absorb that kind of experience.
Yeah. So I've been to the States almost 20 times. I've seen a lot of different states, different neighborhoods. I think the most culturally different experience that I had was in Atlanta, in Georgia. In the sense that, it felt, well, also to say I was there the day after Trump got elected. So it might not have been the most uplifting time.
Okay.
For that community.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah. Okay.
But I find a lot of the planned cities lack soul and identity. There's no center. It's all with the grid structure, and it's different from most European cities or cities in the US on the northeast coast. What was I going to say? But yeah, it was very telling. I found it a bit depressing and soulless, and not what I had expected from a Black community, because I'm not colorblind, so I will not act as if people don't have a different skin color from the one that I have, because I think that would invalidate their experience.
Sure.
So I do want to recognize that, and it's also a reality. Not that I will proactively make it a subject, but yeah, I also want to recognize that it comes with pure privileges in a lot of domains. But yeah, that was a really striking and memorable experience.
How long did you spend in Atlanta?
Not that long. It was also a work trip.
My next question would be, have you ever thought about spending some time within a completely different culture, neighborhood?
Well, I would say that I have, in a sense.
Is there the curiosity there for that?
No, not anymore. So I think I moved from the suburbs in Belgium, and I lived in Brussels and Leuven. Then I moved to the Netherlands, and even though it's the same language as the Flemish and neighboring countries, it's one of the biggest cultural differences between countries in Europe. And when moving, you learn about a new culture, but you also learn so much about the culture you're coming from, because you see things to a different pair of eyes.
Right.
So that I found really interesting. And now I've always said I don't want to be at a flying distance from my family. And I would enjoy working abroad, but then I would even prefer Asia.
Why is that?
I don't know. It just appeals to me a lot more. But then for a limited period of time, like 6 months or so. But other than that, no. I'm happy to be here and feel a bit more settled. I've lived out of a suitcase for almost 3 years, 2 years, where I was traveling every week, was waking up in hotels. I had no idea where I was. I really had woke up very disoriented and really had to think, where am I now? And it's a very lonely existence, I find, to be traveling that much. So no, I'm happy to stay put.
But you prefer the Netherlands over Belgium?
I prefer Amsterdam over Belgium. I wouldn't want to live elsewhere in the Netherlands.
All right. So basically, Amsterdam is your city.
Yeah. Otherwise, living outside of a city is not that exciting for me. So then I would maybe live in Rotterdam, then in Belgium to Ghent or Antwerp or Brussels. Mm-hmm. If it would be a suburb or the countryside, then for me it's not that different in terms of experience.
One of the major cities, yeah, right. Well, I kind of have that with Antwerp. Mm-hmm. This has become a great town for me to hang out. It's not too big.
Yes.
And at the same time, I'm able to get around also. Mm-hmm. I'm more of a city guy as well. Yeah. And being able to get around in town and, travel, everything is basically in walking distance if you really want to, do that. Mm-hmm. So I kind of like that idea as well. And, okay, well, I have been really enjoying this conversation. It's quite a while since we actually had a talk with each other.
Yeah, no, that's true. We've been seeing each other, but not really had much conversation.
Right. But I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and, sharing your experiences and, the subject matter that we spoke about. And I'm looking forward to, seeing you again soon. I have to get up to Amsterdam one day again and check out the city. You probably know it better than me by now. Being there for so long.
Yeah.
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for the invite.
I'm glad you wanted to revisit and sending you a lot of love as always. We'll see each other in the near future.
Thanks so much. Have a good afternoon.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This is MPP, and I'm Eddie C. Well, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Anke about diversity. Now, let's take the word diversity for a second and just break it down. If you look it up in the dictionary, it says that it's the state of being diverse or variety. It also says the practice or quality or including in involving other people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds, of different genders and sexual orientations. Well, in today's society, I do think that we need to become a little bit more diverse on how we see things and, as Anke said, look at it from an interesting point of view, because we can always learn from each other. There's never one way which is the right way. I think there's a diverse road of possibilities that we should look at in our lives. And whatever we do, we can definitely learn from each other. So on those words, here's my quote. Diversity. A multitude of cultures, beliefs, and visions. Not black or white, but neutral and colorful. Discovering yourself by seeing other viewpoints. Journeys of abstract differences and habits. The joy of experiences new to your lifestyle. An open mind, heart, and love for life. Well, that's all for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank my special guest, Miss Anke Sunaert, for coming on and sharing her ideas and views, not only about her vision of diversity, but some of her trips that she's been on and her view about life in general. And remember, diversity, it's not only one thing, but it's many things. Until next time. You can find me on all platforms like Spotify, Android, and Apple. On Facebook, look for My Positive Podcast, and my website is mypositivepodcast.com. You can also contact me via my website or Facebook. A very special thanks to my technical producer, Iswan. This show is a production by Antwerp Podcast Service. My name is Eddie C., and this was MPP, My Positive Podcast. Tune in next time and stay positive.